And then I'll move on to Dr. Cass Anderson Carpenter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Cass Anderson Carpenter. I'm an assistant professor of psychology at Michigan State University, so I am in the United States. I'm originally from Louisiana, so you might detect some of that Louisiana twang in my voice. I do research on substance use and social determinants of health, focusing on historically marginalized, vulnerable, and underserved communities. As far as my review experience, I've been an ad hoc reviewer for probably 15 journals so far. I'm on the editorial board of 4, and I also do grant reviews for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and for the National Institutes of Health.
Awesome, thank you. Greg, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Real, registered nurse by profession, third generation settler on my dad's side, many hundreds of years French Canadian on my mother's side. Currently, I'm living in Treaty 4, and I acknowledge that I am in Treaty 4 and thank the elders and the knowledge keepers for this land that I'm on and for my traditional kind of settler homestead that's in Treaty 6 area that I'm decolonizing currently by ripping down all the barns. I'm happy to be with NCC NEAR, the National Coordinating Center for the NEARs, as a research manager, and this is kind of month 2.5 for me, so I'm pretty new. I've got a little bit of background with editing and reviewing of papers, grant submissions, and those types of things. My master's is in professional communication, specializing in international intercultural communication. I can talk fast, but I can actually slow it down and use the pause, which is also helpful. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Greg. Dr. Henry?
Good morning, everybody. Robert Henry or Bobby Henry, Métis from Prince Albert. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Indigenous Studies here at the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm also the interim director for another 6 weeks with the First Nations Métis Health Research Network, and I'm a part of the IMN. From the beginning, my background and research areas primarily focus on individuals engaged in street lifestyles, with a focus on individuals engaged in street gangs. Background within research is I do a lot of reviewing of SSHRC and CIHR grants, so social sciences, humanities research, and Canadian Institute of Health research grants. I've also edited different manuscripts and so forth. I'm also an editor of 5 collections now of Marguerite. That's how Marguerite and I really started to get to know each other, was through one of these collections. So within health and Indigenous sociology and justice. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. Dr. Data?
Hi, my name is Ranjan Data. I'm the color settler in Canada, currently living in TD7 territories. Actually, I was saying TD6 because I lived 10 years at TD6 territory. Currently, I'm an assistant professor at Mount Royal University, Indigenous Studies, and also Canada Research Chair 2 in Community Disaster Research. My teaching mostly focused on land-based perspective, land-based resiliency, decolonization, anti-racist perspective on community-based research. And regarding journal, I have a publication. I also have reviewing 5 or 6 journal as a reviewer, and also invited editor sometime for the couple of books I did. I also did lots of journal editing and also group writing group for the postdoc, masters, and PhD students. So I have few experience on this area. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'll go around and the students can introduce yourselves as well. Actually, maybe I'll start with Fleur, who's to my right on my screen, who I know is not a student, but.
Well, actually, it's nice to go right after Ranjan because it's Ranjan that recommended the book that we're using. Isn't that right, Allison?
Yeah.
Yeah, so because I think he had used it before. So thank you for that. It's been a great book to kind of guide us on this course. So Fleur McQueen Smith, I'm the manager of the First Nations and Métis Health Research Network, which is funded by CIHR. So I work really closely with Allison. I'm originally from Treaty 7 territory, so Calgary, settler. Although I lived in Ontario for 20 years and now I've lived in Saskatchewan for 18 years, I think. So I've moved around a little bit. And yeah, it's been a good course and I'm looking forward to today.
Thanks, Fleur. Indiana, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Indiana Best. I am a Métis student from Alberta, but I'm here liking Saskatoon. I'm doing my Master's of Public Health, and I'm just doing I'm in the final stages of writing my thesis. My thesis is looking at Métis culture and addictions programming. Yeah, so I'm just working on that and kind of have some ideas of hopefully what I can publish afterwards, but I've just been focusing on the thesis document. But I still really like these check-ins.
Thanks so much. Jenny?
Hi, good morning. My name is Jenny Gardapi. I am a grandmother of 4 and 2 grandpups and a mother of 6. I am from Beardies and Okanagan Cree Nation here in Treaty 6. I'm a second-year PhD student. I'm a master's degree in public health, and my research is focusing on Indigenous people with physical disabilities.
Thanks, Jenny. Kathy?
Good morning. I'm Kathy McMullen, and I'm originally from Lac La Ronge Indian Band, and that's in Treaty 6 territory. And I am a mother of 2 sons, one who walks in the spirit world, Martin, who passed away with glioblastoma multiforme, and my other son, Matthew, who lives in Humboldt, gifted me with a little grandson, Logan, and I want to acknowledge my beautiful granddaughter, or daughter-in-law. I'm doing my PhD in health sciences, and my thesis title or dissertation title is Walking in the Footsteps of Our Cree Ancestral Grandmothers. And it's looking at the connection between TP teachings and women who lived in hand-built homes, because there's been a change in how life is when people lived in traditional housing, even in the 1940s, until government-built housing came into place. So I'm looking at the well-being that happened in traditional homes, and what we can learn from it in today's society in terms of housing. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Kathy. Belinda?
Tansekiwa, Nanaskuman, Kitakamskat Tanawal, Sturgeon Lake, Virginia, Maga Saskatoon, Norwegian Migot, Nistamina, Nikisitan, Kichin Masnagan. So I'm from Sturgeon Lake First Nations. I'm a Nehio in the province, from the province of Saskatchewan. I just finished my dissertation, and it was entitled Ikakwe Pimothian Utanigik, The Long Journey Home. And so my area of research was in regards to Nehewewin language revitalization, looking at prior to treaties, after treaties, looking at land. It's multidisciplinary, so it also involved Indigenous studies, education, history, and anthropology. And so I drew out when did language loss actually start to occur? But even before that, I was looking at the flourishing of the Cree language within the Y dialect boundary. So at the time, prior to contact, during contact, the Cree language was actually flourishing and we were gaining speakers. It wasn't until like the Indian Act and the Gradual Civilization Act that we started to, our languages started to become oppressed. And so I looked at language loss, and then again, language revitalization, and then a connection to land, how we gain a sense of identity from the lands that we come from that are attached to language. And then how do we pursue that right now in the present into the future with mainstream system education. And so I'm happy to be done. As far as writing goes, I was able to publish 5 of my papers while in graduate studies. The first one was my master's, learning to be a Neheo through language. And then throughout my 6 years of PhD studies, I published 4 more manuscripts. One right now is being submitted, and I hope to publish the rest of my chapters from my dissertation. And I'm currently waiting for a peer review back from the University of Regina Press. I co-authored another book, and this is based on bringing Nehewewin home, and this is for families who are wanting to revitalize the language with their children at home. And so as far as peer reviewing, I did get to peer review Sheila Nicholas's book in regards to Indigenous language pedagogies. So that was like my first experience in peer review. I hope to do more. I have been asked, and I'm just not ready yet. I'm just not situated yet. I'm not sure if you all know, but I did accept a position with the University of Victoria in the education faculty, of course, in the field of Indigenous language revitalization. Except Fatima. Hi.
Awesome, thank you. I hadn't heard that, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
When's your start date?
I actually start July 1st.
Wow.
And I actually, I applied for like 2 positions. I wasn't like, I was just testing the waters out there, and both offered tenure track position offers, but I went with the University of Victoria.
Awesome.
So yeah, that starts July 1st. And I was able to negotiate the Nehiyawak language experience summer immersion programs that I've been doing for the last 17 years. And so I'm able to come back home and still continue Indigenous language revitalization research among adults, and how do we acquire language.
Wonderful, thank you. Mika, do you want to go next? And I'll say hello to Denise, who's joined us. We're just doing introductions right now.
Yeah, so my name is Mika Rothwell. I'm a settler living on Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon. I finished my master's in late 2020, working with a local HIV/AIDS service organization in Saskatoon. Now I work in community health and epidemiology at the U of S, coordinating a project on HPV vaccinations and barriers to vaccination. And I do some work with Bobby on the side with Indigenous hockey research and some of the street gang work.
Thank you. Denise?
Good morning. So I was kind of late. I was in professional development with my other job. They're still going. But my name is Denise Kennedy. I come from Pasqua First Nation. I currently teach out here on Pasqua. I've been teaching language to students from kindergarten to grade 12. This semester I'm focusing on my high school students, and I just finished my master's in March. I did my defense, and my thesis is getting out there now, and it's about language revitalization, using language nests in the home. What started that was being a language teacher in the community, where you have students that know more of the language than the parents do at home. So I needed to find ways to get the language in the home, so the students had somebody to communicate with rather than just in a classroom. So that's what started my research. And it's nice to hear that I think it's Belinda is going to be in Victoria. I have goals that I haven't started yet to eventually attend the university in Victoria to get my PhD in language revitalization. So we'll see when that happens. And yeah, my internet's wonky because of the crazy weather. So that's why I don't have my camera on. I just came from another Zoom and it wasn't working very well.
No worries. Thanks so much for joining. And thanks everybody for your introductions. We can keep this very informal. I shared some of the questions, and so maybe we can start with some of those to our panelists that this student shared last week. So maybe I'll pose one of those and we can go around, and then if anybody wants to jump in with questions, I think that would be okay. So please feel free to unmute yourself. And so maybe we can start with like general tips and tricks for students in terms of things that one of the things we talked about last week was things that annoy you as a reviewer, or kind of that you look for, or on the flip side of that, any like positive things that kind of clue you into this being a paper that should be included and whatnot. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to start us off, or if I should point someone out, but feel free to jump in if there's tips or tricks or thoughts that come to mind immediately when you're reviewing papers for your respective journals. Maybe Cass, do you want to start us off?
I had a feeling it was going to come to me. I think the one thing that annoys me most is when there's no logical flow to the overall manuscript. So I've read manuscripts where if I have to go get a glass of wine to get through it, it's a reject. And it's usually because like I can't follow the argument. So if the hypotheses don't align with the literature, if the conclusions aren't supported by the results, those things, like it makes me have to really hunt in the manuscript to find something positive to say. On the flip side of that, some of the things that make it easy for me to recommend acceptance or accept with revisions is when there are, like I can see the big picture. I can imagine myself actually conducting the procedures where it's spelled out. When the conclusions are logically drawn from the results that were presented. Those are the things that make it easier for me as a reviewer to recommend a positive decision to the editor. And those are the papers that I enjoy reading.
Awesome, thank you. Ranjan, do you want to go next?
Sure, I agree with what already said. I would like to point that the whole main script that we are writing is a one story and have to be connected with each other. So define the term you are using as simple as in plain language, because I found in many articles that sometimes their sentences are too big, like 30 words, 40 words, even 50 words. But in my plain language training, I was told maximum sentence should be within 10 words. So make simple as it is, explain, define, and make it with active sentence, not the passive sentence. So we have a tendency to write this research was done, write it in active sentence and define the key term that you are using in our academia, even though it seems people will understand, but it's sometimes not, because so we have own understanding in our own term. And it's another important point is with theoretical framework or conceptual framework, define it, what the theoretical framework we are using. I'm from the social science research. I always would like to situate myself, who I am as a researcher, and what I'm doing, and why I'm doing, and how my paper or work is going to benefit to the academia and society. So explain the importance of goal of the paper at the very beginning, if it is possible in introduction. And make it clear what we are going to say or what we are going to say with this project. Because if I don't see how this research is going to benefit me as a reader, it's difficult to situate me in the readings that I'm working. And I see when we are talking about evidence, our story is our evidence in qualitative research, but say in a way that is engaged and clear the procedures. And if we are talking about the result, try to connect. For example, if we done our PhD or master's, don't try to bring everything what we have done. Just only bring whatever is connected with the goal of the in the paper that we are going to or objectives of this paper they're talking about. Make it relevant and discuss in a way with the previous work and also our work and what is going to need to be done in future, so that whole paper become a story, whole section is a story, and story of stories. So that is my one point. And I would like to say just couple of quick tricks regarding that I have found myself is useful. Use the topic sentence always, whatever paragraph we are writing, because topic sentence is help reader to understand what we are going to explain. And write into a section, save it different file. For example, intro section, method section, result and discussion in one folder, so that we are not scrolling all these details when we are doing. And write multiple versions of it. Create the track changes. And one more point I found this is useful. Write it in single space, so we don't need to spend a lot of time to scrolling down what we have written or found the comments. So that these are the issue I found useful for me particularly.
Thank you. Margarita?
Yeah, I agree with former speakers and going into some examples of what I also think is important and what is easily forgotten, I have seen when I'm reviewing papers, is that it's important for me as a reader to see what kind of data you are presenting and how you are writing about the data. Is it data that are possible to generalize or not? Is it qualitative or quantitative data regarding what methods you have used? So it's also important to have a stringency in that. So if you are using a qualitative method, for example, don't ask for quantitative data in the aim or the basic questions. So follow the line also there, depending on the kind of data you are looking for and the issue of the actual paper and study. That's one thing. And also another thing that I have seen is easily to forget is to be obvious about to what you are, to what support you have for your statements. Is it from the stories, for example, from informants, or is it your own analysis, or is it from literature? So make it obvious where you find support for your statements. So I stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Henry?
Sure, you can just say Bobby. I don't know. Again,
Okay.
the only people who call me doctor are family, and that's it, because I forced them to. But really, I agree with what's been said. The only thing that I can really add right now is the idea of being specific to the population that you're actually writing about. So the biggest pet peeve that I have about journal articles coming to me is the use of Indigenous and subsuming, especially when we're talking about Indigenous Canada, and we'll use Canada for most of the students here, that they'll use this language as Indigenous, but really the focus is on First Nations. And then this has larger implications down the road that people don't think about, like with Métis and Inuit and so forth, especially in and around health data, which then impacts the ways in which people and policies and communities are impacted. And that's one of the biggest pet peeves to get across to writers that I've seen, is that they want to use this inclusive term, but really when the data comes out, they're only using First Nations data, but then the people who read it will then interpret that this is all Indigenous people. And this becomes one of the biggest issues that I see within the writing that's coming out. So be very, if you're writing about First Nations and you have First Nations data, like Marguerite just said, if you have, this is the data set you have, then say First Nations, don't say Indigenous. If it's Métis data, then it's Métis data. It's not Indigenous data. And so, because we need to make sure that there's different policies, different things that impact that. And that's one of the biggest pet peeves that I have, that we just can't seem to jump that hurdle yet, that we just lump all Indigenous together. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves when I see, especially Indigenous focused articles and stuff coming through. And it's one of the hardest things to try and get people to get their mind and thinking around that. So just something to think about moving forward.
Thank you. Greg?
Hi, and again, thanks for including me on this panel today. I'll kind of mirror a couple things, and I'll just go through my quick list here. Thesis statement is, I don't really want to have to go looking for that. There's a logical place for a thesis statement to be. And I always say, when you're stuck, cluster. If you're ever stuck with your writing or even getting going, cluster method of writing is basically like a big post-it notes, and it'll help get you unstuck. And it's easily just do cluster method of writing, and it'll help you out. And I know in the previous kind of writing kind of call, some of my pet peeves were personification. This paper will explain, a paper can't explain. So those types of things. Passive voice drives me nuts. Lack of Oxford comma. And again, I've told mostly, I think, the students on the call here today, ending a paragraph with a citation, it honestly really drives me nuts. And it's amazing, like you review like a 20, 30, 40, 50, however long the paper is, or the article or the journal submission. It's amazing that as the paper goes on, the paragraphs get shorter and shorter and shorter. And then it seems like, a lot of writers just kind of run out of steam. So make sure you have the same intention throughout your paper. I've seen some submissions where they're just like, basically paragraph is like 2 citations and then it moves on. But as a reviewer, as a reader, eventually we all want to know what your thoughts are and how, each of the citations and each of the paragraphs goes to, goes towards like your argument. And again, if your argument's not clear and if things aren't, if you do have to go get kind of a glass of wine or 2, you keep the writer interested. Reading your paper out loud is kind of one of the things I've put in the comments a lot. And as a reviewer, I try and be kind and not too harsh, but sometimes, and I might even put like a little LOL in there every once in a while. But yeah, as a reviewer, we don't really want to be too harsh on people because, again, we're publishers too, and we author different articles, and it's nice to get those reviewed. But you can't be too harsh. Obviously, don't like make stuff up and don't plagiarize. I think that's one of the things that is kind of sometimes has to be restated again. That's about it. I like reviewing papers. I like kind of like not hacking them up, but I like kind of giving some good feedback. But it takes time. And so if you're sending those to like your colleagues or your fellow students or whoever you're sending out to review, be nice to the reviewers. And again, for the couple journals that I review for, it's a lot of work. It's like hours and hours and hours of work if you're going through a fine-tooth comb. Sometimes I like to read the article first just to see how it flows, and then I'll go through and I'll make some notes when I do a first review. And then like with my second kind of like focused review, that's when the comments come out and the track changes get kind of blowing up then. So, but yeah, those are kind of a couple of the hints that I'll give.
If I may add another pet peeve is when writers don't answer the so what question. And it goes to Greg's point about, part of it goes to Greg's point about ending a sentence or ending a paragraph with citations. So when I was in graduate school and I was working on my comprehensive exam, which was the structure was far different from anywhere else that I've seen. I took a writing course and we were taught the CSR method. And so the first sentence is the claim. The following sentences are the support for the claim. And the final sentence is the relevance, or so what. So it's like you make this claim, you have all the support, and it's like, okay, well, so what? What's the purpose of this paragraph? And link that to the claim. And so that's part of it. And each paragraph should have its own answer to the so what question. But then at the end, in the discussion, there should be a section on implications for research, policy, and practice. Because, of obviously implications for research, but we're not just writing about our findings just to circulate it among the scientific community. The science is for the people. That's the way it should be, and that's the way it should always be. So it really irks me when authors don't have anything to say about their findings and how they might be used in terms of influencing policy change or influencing policymakers or even the practice. And to me, not having that suggests that the authors didn't even think about the broader implications of their work.
Yeah, and then the so what, your kind of the relevance of that paragraph leads right into the next paragraph. And again, if you're stuck, then take your paragraphs and just cut them all on piece of paper, put them all on the wall and do some clustering around those and see how they all kind of meet up. Because sometimes I just tell people, I just say, well, this paragraph was way better up here. And yeah, so the flow will help. But again, it comes with time and it comes with practice for sure. And it comes with accepting reviews. Don't get upset when you get a review and it's full of changes and stuff like that. It helps us all grow. And me as a reviewer, I grow every time I kind of get the opportunity and the pleasure of reviewing people's work.
One more point I would like to add. In introduction, an outline for the whole paper is very helpful. So it's retelling the story. So as a reviewer, I want to see what you are going to talk about. Be clear about in your outline how you have outlined your whole paper in the introduction, so that I know what I'm going to get it or expect it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from students about what's been said so far? No. Maybe oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I said I don't have any questions, but I just have a couple comments that really stuck out with me. when Dr. Data talked about the story of stories, I really like that because it kind of just balls up everything. And when Bobby was talking about be specific to the population you're referring to regarding Indigenous people and or Métis, I really like that. I like to even go further as to go talk about like which like nation for me, because for me I would prefer to speak about Nehiyawak rather than just Indigenous people. Sorry, I thought my video was on. But yeah, I really like that. And I think that will help too with data gathering as well for moving policy further when we have more information on specific populations. And when Dr. Kenston was talking about science should be for the people, like that's I believe that too. And I think that's a really good way of moving our research further.
Thanks, Jenny. I was thinking what might be helpful, because a few of the other questions were around like process timeframe for reviewing, what happens when your paper is submitted, and then the timeline for different journals. But I know across our panel, we have a variety of disciplines, and that some of those things might be different for each discipline or between journals themselves. So maybe if each of you wanted to speak to your experience with the journals that you've been a reviewer for in terms of what the process is like, and if it's maybe discipline specific, or if it's, you know, broader than that, and that kind of thing. So maybe Margarita, if you want to start us off and talk about your experience as a journal reviewer in your field, or, you know, across disciplines potentially, and what that kind of process looks like once you once a paper is submitted and sent for review.
Yeah, in social work, we might have a variety of epistemology, sciences, or basics theories, depending on the issue. What I'm looking for is the core of the aim of the paper, and the core. What is the problem? What is the issue or the aim of the paper, and also be obvious about the relevance for example, social work, if that's the journal's main discipline. What's the relevance for social work? Even though the content in the paper may be multidisciplinary, it's important to even more, I think, in that kind of papers, to be obvious about the aim of the paper, and also relevance for example, social work, or relevance for Indigenous people, a specific group, or for, as I'm writing about, also Indigenous Sami with disabilities. So how is this relevant for Sami with disability? I'm looking for such issues in paper too. And also, how is this issue related both to communities, but also to theoretical perspective? How is it theorized in the end? It's all the time about having this red thread, the stringence being obvious all the way, and thus make the relevance also obvious for the reader. So that's what I'm looking for. Then it's okay to combine, for example, in the analysis, if I see the clarity in the issue, the relevance, for example, for an Indigenous community, the result, and also if that is obvious all the time, then I can also see the relevance in the theorizing, the theories used or previous research, for example. So that, I think that's something I'm looking for.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to go next? Maybe Bobby, around your experience?
Sorry, I had to step away for a second, so I don't know what the question was being asked.
Sure, just going around and maybe speaking to your experience as a reviewer. If you've reviewed for a variety of journals, excuse me, something like around the timelines and the process once you receive, like if a student's to submit or someone's to submit a journal article, kind of like the timeline, the process, and if it's disciplinary specific as well.
Sure. So I'm not sure if I'm going to answer the question correctly, but the best thing I ever saw was a colleague of mine when I was at the University of Calgary, and he had a picture of young Luke Skywalker on his door, and it said submitting a journal article. And then by the time he got it back, it's the old Luke Skywalker with a cane and everything else with revisions finally. So what I'm trying to say about that is that sometimes it takes a long time. It depends on the journal and how they're trying to push things out. Some journals are semi-annually, some are annually, some are bi-weekly almost, depending on the medical journal that you're looking at and trying to go through. So that's one of the things. One of the biggest issues that I've seen is with special edition issues, seem to be the longest ones to get through. And it's almost like the editorial team kind of lets that one slide because it's a special editorial team that kind of does that. So if you're a student who's submitting to a special edition for a journal collection, know that it's going to take some time to go with that. The other one that takes a lot of time that I think is often really overlooked at the Academy for tenure and promotion is that of edited collections, book collections. The one that we're just putting out now with myself and Dr. Innes Van Stuyvendale and Jade McDougall that's been 6 years of getting through everything. The collection before that took me 4 years to get everything through. And I think people forget that for book collections, it goes through an edited process with the editors, then it goes out for peer review, then it comes back to the editors to look at it again, then it gets sent back to the contributors, then the contributors get back to you, then it gets back to the copy editor, then the copy editor send it back to the editors then relook at it, then the editors send it out to make sure everything's done, then it all gets sent back. So you're looking at a long time. The process isn't just as simple as going back and forth, because what you have to realize is that sometimes, and this will answer one of the other questions, you don't have to answer things. And when you're looking at edited collections, you don't always have to agree with the reviewers. We're not always subject experts in the areas, or we may not have the total knowledge of what's going on. And what we're reading it for is what everybody said so far. What is the clarity? Are you making an argument? Are you going through this way? And sometimes our suggestions actually don't fit the field very well. So you actually have to remember when you're writing this, they would always try and find subject matter experts. But sometimes if you're on the cutting edge, there's no subject matter experts there. And so you need to make sure it's clear for that. And that's what happens for a lot of grad students. You're on the cutting edge for the most of your research because nobody's really done the master's in your way or the PhD in your way. And when you're submitting it, the subject matter experts are limited. So, but yeah, I've had some journal like the one that Meek and I are just putting in with the Beardy's Hockey. That was actually pretty fast for an international, the top international sports journal. It only took, I think, submitted in December, somewhere around there, and finally got everything back. So in 5 months, 6 months, there you go. And then Allison, yes, sometimes it is the subject matter expert. I'll give you a quick story too. So one of the first journal articles I ever submitted was on challenging the ways in which criminologists in Canada have examined Indigenous street gangs. And it actually got denied. And it was actually a really good article. And it got denied, and this goes with Greg, and it goes with the subject matter experts. The problem is I was bashing who was considered the Indigenous street gang expert in Canada, and they were one of their colleagues was one of the reviewers. And my comments that I got back were, but I thought so-and-so was really kind to Indigenous people or to the native people of Canada. Therefore, why are you going after him? And so this is what we can sometimes see within reviewers as well, is this sort of stuff. So and I didn't know the game at that time, and I didn't send it back and say, listen, this is the whole point of the article, was to challenge this person. So I just left it alone because I didn't know. So as individuals who are just getting into this in your first article or 2 articles, you don't have to accept the comments that are being made by the reviewers. And if you can go and actually submit back and say, this is the reason why the article is saying it this way, editorial boards then make the decision to give it back to the reviewer. But yeah, anywhere between 3 months to 5 years, I guess you can actually look at for this idea of papers going through the editorial process until it's submitted to publish. So I'll go that way.
On the note around that initial article, if you were to go back, would you submit it again or respond to the revisions, or would you would you submit it to a different journal for consideration, or do you think?
No, I would submit it back to that journal because it is that journal is the top journal for what was going on within that. It's the Journal of Female Victimology, and it was examining the ways in which Indigenous women were being presented as gang members. And so I would submit it right back into that journal. But with the comments that I know now, that to say, this is the argument why it's being made, this is why you take this person's work and you have to critique it, because if not, this is the point. So what I've learned though is I would have to rewrite the paper a bit because it wasn't clear enough, obviously, that was the point. And that's what I need to understand, but not shift the way the argument was being made. But yes, some journals, yes, it's when it gets rejected, sometimes it just doesn't fit. The Canadian Journal of Political Science says that they do a lot of Indigenous stuff, but they actually don't. And it's only in special edition issues, and they don't actually publish anything Indigenous outside of that special edition. So that's why you got to be careful where you're going with this as well. So
I see, Margarita, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was inspired by what you said, Bobby, and I would give an example from my first paper. It was from my work in my thesis. It was about in public health, and it was submitted in a journal in public health, and it was from the part that was a quantitative study. I had a qualitative part also, from the comments from the reviewer were quite interesting because they were somewhat contradictory. A couple of them, 2 or 3, said one thing, another 1 or 2 said just the opposite. So I was a bit confused, but I was talking to my supervisor and also going through the comments, and I found out that a couple of 1 didn't actually understood my point of view at some parts. So what I did in the end was followed most of the comments, but some I didn't do anything about. I rejected them actually, and the paper was it was accepted in the end. So I learned that I don't have to agree with everyone. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I see Ranjan, go ahead.
I want to share that my own experience as well. When I was writing my first article, couple of articles, I would say, it was rejected from the couple of journal. But some of the journal say, oh, it's excellent. And actually, those articles became one of my top cited journal. Is 80, 90 times cited, but it was the first time it's rejected from the other journal. So that's why I found it's good to check with the editor before we submitting. In the book that we have, there is a template how to check with the editor. So it's better to know what they're expecting, if they're interested on this, or if they are exciting. Nowadays, I'm very political. Of course, submitting my journal, I don't just submit any journal that is, even though it's higher rank. I journal if they have social justice issue, if they have the indigenous perspective that I wanted to use. Because this is very important to know what forms of idea they are using. If they don't understand my worldview, actually I'm wasting my time. So I'm very political on this perspective. Regarding the journal submission, it varies, as Bobby said, from 3 months to even 5-6 years. It's happened many times with me. So what I'm doing, I'm just not only just submitting and waiting for what journal is saying. I'm just working 5-6 manuscripts at a time, so that while I'm waiting, I'm working on other manuscripts. So just keep on 5-6 or whatever you are doing. Just try to work on other articles so that you have a gap as well for in your thinking, and also have opportunity to publish as much as you want.
Thank you. Has your experience, I guess I'm kind of curious about, like, when things tend to take longer, is that, it sounds like it's more common when it's like an edited collection, both journal and published book. Is there any time, like, you know, in terms of like journals, and if let's say they're newer, or that you would pull your like article and submit it else? Like, I know that the practice is that you generally submit to one and wait for, you know, confirmation or response as to whether it's accepted. But if something is taking 4 years or whatever, is there, like, is that an acceptable practice, or is that kind of like frowned upon if it's, I guess, I don't know. I'm just curious how that kind of feeds into stuff. Go ahead, Cass. Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually ran into this issue. I submitted a paper to the Journal of Homosexuality, and it took 9 months to get the first round of reviews back. So I usually give a journal 3 months. And if I haven't heard anything, I send an email, you know, just asking for an update. So I did that. And then 3 more months passed by. And I asked for an update again, you know, just wanting to know what the status of the manuscript. After the 9th month, I told the editor, and I forwarded the chain so that the editor can see, hey, this is not the first time I've asked about this. This is now the 3rd time, and it's been 9 months. And if I don't hear anything back, I'm just going to withdraw the paper. And the day after I got all the reviews, and it was an accept with minor revisions. It's like, okay, you could have told me this like, I don't know, 6 months ago. But yeah, so I know at least in the United States, there is a big shortage of reviewers because people have gotten so busy, especially with COVID. So the turnaround time to authors is much longer now than it was, you know, previously. And I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but normally, at least when I review, I get notifications, I get reminders or emails saying that the reviews have to be due anywhere from, like, some journals want the reviews back in 3 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna happen because I have things to do. But usually it's within a month or so for the ones that I review for. And then if the authors receive a revise and resubmit, then they have usually 2 to 3 months to get the revisions in. But yeah, if you've gone 3 months and haven't heard anything about a decision, it's okay to reach out to the editor and politely, politely ask about an update. After it gets to like 6-9 months, then you can, I don't want to say be more forceful, but you can be a little more professionally direct in your communications with the editor. And if you believe in your paper strong enough and the editor or the review or the editorial board is dragging their feet, do not be afraid to withdraw your paper and submit it somewhere else, especially if you have a number of journals on your list that you can submit your paper to.
Awesome, thank you. I saw Ranjan, you had your hand up, and then Greg's got his as well. So I don't know if you took it down. Did you want to jump in, Ranjan?
No, I agree with what already been said. Yeah, do not be afraid to ask 2 to 3 months, 8 to 12 weeks. And one of my book actually was 2.5 years with SUNY, New York University, State University of Newark. So after 2.5 years, it was all positive feedbacks from the reviewers. And when it was in the board, they said, no, it has to go again because they didn't get the critical feedback. And it also happened with University of Toronto Press 3 times. Then I just withdraw my whole manuscript and submitted to the other publisher, and it got accepted within 6 months. So yeah, need to check. And if it is too long, let them know what you are thinking. Do not be afraid to withdraw.
Can I just say something real quick, Allison, before Greg goes? And sorry, Greg, it's just to go with the timeline to make, just not to scare people. When I'm saying the 5 years, like with the edited collection of books, I'm talking about that's the day we get the abstract as an editor for a book on what's going in to the end, because then you have to go through all the abstracts that come in, review the abstracts, send notification out to the people. They write 6-7 months to write a paper, they get the paper, and then it goes through. So when I'm saying 5 years down the road for an edited collection of a book, that's basically start to finish of the whole process. So I just want to clarify that because I don't want to scare people about edited book collections and stuff like that. It's just a different process. It's not about submitting a full paper. It's starting with an abstract and then building that sort of collection together. So I just wanted to put that out there. So sorry, Greg.
Oh, no, not at all. I'll just say that everyone on my screen here is eventually going to be a reviewer, and people that are reviewing, you're going to review again. I've read this one article on an editing and kind of proofreading site where people think that, my time as a reviewer, I should be getting paid for that time. But that's a big ethical dilemma when you're getting paid from a journal or a publisher to review things. And for me, I think it's a reciprocal relationship as a person that's authored some papers before, not that many. I think it's kind of just part of the process. So for Indiana or Blend, like some of the students here, people are going to be reviewing your stuff, but eventually you're going to be reviewing their stuff too. It's kind of like paying school taxes. Someone paid taxes for me to go to school, and I'm going to pay taxes for someone else to go to school. So there is a reciprocal relationship between authors, publishers, and reviewers. And for me, I obviously don't get paid for any of my work, and lots of time I do it kind of on the side of my desk or whatever, or when I have some free time. But that's a good thing to do. I'll just give a quick story of the one time I published something. I do a lot as a registered nurse. There's a lot of lateral violence in our profession, and more so even for the minority kind of populations, people with disabilities and Indigenous nurses that I work with for sure. But so the literature supports the language of nurses eat their young, but the person that was submitting this to didn't like that because obviously it was a nurse and submitting it to a nurse. Basically, she said, Greg, you can't say that. I said, well, it's supported by the literature. So we went kind of back and forth. And then the communications person who published the article left that in there. And it was interesting. So as I've moved forward in kind of my writing and my practice as a registered nurse, the other thing I can say about you guys doing any kind of research going forward and that kind of stuff is try not to get trapped into the kind of what's the problem, how are you going to fix it, and that kind of Western linear way of thinking about things. I used to do a lot of work on lateral violence and bullying in the nursing profession, but I flipped that over the last bunch of years, and I do lateral kindness and how we can be supportive, because there's so much good that is happening out there. And I think, even with me working as a registered nurse in many First Nations communities in our province and outside, it's easy to get myopic and look at all the kind of shit that's happening out there and say, well, that's a good thing. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to have some solutions. And hopefully that's where I'm going to go. But it's even more valuable when you can see those sparks of joy and those healthy positive areas where there is growth happening, and grab onto those things and write about that good that's happening. Suicide with First Nations and Inuit populations is way more than it should be. But I always tell people and students that I work with, I say, well, pick a community where there's been 0 suicides in the last, like, say, 5 or 10 years. What are those communities doing? And kind of grab onto that kind of stuff if there is anything out there. Not trying to kind of like belittle the fact that there are issues out there, but there's always a kind of the what, so what, now what, moving forward. And we can kind of really build on a lot of the success stories that are out there. And I think, all the students on the call today, you guys are all success stories, and you guys should all write your own stories.
Cass, I see your hand is up. Did you want to add anything?
No, I don't know why it's still, oh, wait, lower hand. Of course, Cass.
It's the lingering hand.
Yeah.
I'm still in COVID brain.
All of us, I think. One more question. I know I think I had invited our journal reviewers to join us for the first hour. So if you have to jump off, let me know. But there's one more question I wanted to kind of pose to the group before opening it up more broadly. And this was from a student who, Angela, who isn't able to join us this week, but she wanted to know some thoughts and tips on the process of co-writing a paper with a community or community organization, and how this differs as an academic versus when you're like working or embedded within the community organization. And she's kind of going through that process right now. So any thoughts? I know this group, many of you do this regularly. So she was thinking about, in particular, the timelines and just that relationship, and kind of, some of your thoughts on that. I see Bobby has shared a screen, and I see Cass, you have to jump off. So thank you so much for joining. We'll touch base, and I appreciate your time today. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. This was a wonderful conversation, and thank you all for inviting your your United Statesian colleague to be part of such a critical and important discussion. I wish I had this discussion when I was going through my PhD program.
Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Go ahead, Bobby.
So I have published a couple things, and it depends what you're publishing, right? So if we're talking about journal articles and everything else, sometimes it's a lot of work for community partners. And so it's building that relationship beforehand with the research, and then it's working with them and getting it there and making sure that they understand what's being put on and getting their name on it. So with that picture there, I'll just show this right here with the Indigenous women in street gangs. That right there is a manuscript that's going to be going through the University of Alberta Press. And all the women there at every stage signed off on their own narrative. Most people would never actually put them on as authors within that, but that's just the way it is with the work that I was doing with them. So for that point, but the difficulty point is when you're working in certain areas or looking at certain things, like Greg was saying, suicide or violence or addictions, we got to be careful on how, it's not being careful on how we write it, it's writing it up in a way that doesn't create a pathologized or deficit point perspective. And that's sometimes not easy to do, but it's also sometimes the community wants it from that point because they need it in order to get dollars. And they need it to be able to say, we need this money to get programming, and we need to show that it's an issue. So there's this really fine line when you're actually doing community engaged writing back and forth that you need to be able to balance with the community. But it starts with building good community relationships and making sure they understand what's going on with that. And especially when it goes to journals and everything else. When it comes to non-journal writing and like it's going to government reports or reporting going back, that's a whole sort of different sort of way in which to engage with communities. and making sure that those reports are right, because they're going to be using those reports right away, and they're going to be used in a different way. They're going to be used for media releases. They're going to be used for that. So there's a different sort of writing and making sure there's an accountability, I think, at that level. When you're writing for journal articles for academia, the communities are kind of like on the other side. They just want to make sure that it's good, because you're writing to a specific audience. When you're writing those reports for the community and for government, it's a different accountability and a different relationship that you need to have with your community partners to make sure that their voice is first and foremost, especially for those community reports that aren't going through a peer review process in journals and edited collections. So I'll let that go from there.
Thanks. Margarita or Ranjan, Greg, do you have anything you want to?
Yes, I can add. My experience from working with that was one project about Sami with disabilities, and what I write in a paper later was actually they were anonymous in that paper, and it's because I did also, as Bobby said, I talked to the informants, and I let the decision be in their hands, how they wanted to have their words presented. So what I did was transcribed and sent it back to them so they could make any revisions if needed and add something if needed, because I just pointed out what do you want to tell everyone about your life situation with disability. And this was a special situation, as disability is is not a term traditionally used in Sami society, and I experienced also among colleagues in Australia, which I have written together with this paper. It's not a tradition there. We don't even have an exact word for disability in our language. So it's a categorization made by colonial society. So it was about respecting that, and at the same time knowing that the majority society allocating resources have that categorization. So it was about, the main thing was about sending out their stories. What do they want to tell the public about their life situation? What changes? What are their experiences from services, healthcare services, or other welfare state services? What are their experiences, and what changes do they want in that regard? So it was, the main thing was about their words, their stories, their views, and their wishes for the future. So their name wasn't placed out in consensus with the informants. So that was special, and we did the same with the Australian community members. Thank you.
Thank you.
I published 4 or 5 journals with community elder and knowledge keeper. What happened when I did my PhD research and after my PhD research, once we are done with the transcription and planning for the thematic coding, we asked elder who can be a part of this project. Sometimes elder, they suggest, okay, this person would be the perfect this knowledge keeper would be useful for us if they can join your publication. And we talk to them, we work together. Sometimes we make most of the writing and we send that for the feedback. Not necessarily they need to write, but they give comments. Okay, we are happy with this. If you can bring this aspect, it would be helpful. So that's the way they become co-author, because they are guiding the process in analyzing and also writing what they want according to their needs.
Thank you. Maybe we can open it up to general questions. If Jenny, Kathy, Denise, Mika, there's anything else you're curious about or want to chat about a little bit while we have Margarita, Bobby, Greg, and Ranjan on the line. I'll just maybe open it up to the group.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about writing. How do you get your mind using an active voice rather than a passive voice? Because I have that, I keep having like a passive voice when I'm writing. Like, is there any tips that you can use or any test to know that it's not a passive voice? And another one is when you're trying to write from a strengths-based approach, and there's so much like when you're reading is a lot of deficit, is there any tips on how to make it like a strengths-based? And I just wanted to make a comment to Margarita that in our language as well, Nehewak, Cree people, there's no word for disability as well. So I understand where you're coming from, where you say that's a colonial concept, because that's what I've been finding a lot, is trying to align the way our communities think and the Western thought, and trying to make it so that people would understand it.
And we are actually one of the co-authors. He's from Canada, John Ward, and we are four. There are one from Australia, one from United States, Lavona Loven, and John Ward, and John Gilroy and me. And we actually recently had this paper published where we are discussing the term disability used and how the language has influenced also the colonizing of services and support offered to people, indigenous people with disabilities. So it's interesting also discussing what terms are used and what do the language do to indigenous people when the terms are not created by indigenous people. It's an history in the language too, both also from colonial societies. It's a history in their language, how they look at indigenous people also in this. About your question about passive writing and being active, I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but I think it's being active for me is making obvious statements about to what do I support my statements, to show it, for example, if I refer to what an informant had said, I write that it's obvious that that these stories, this statement come from one or more informants. I make it obvious in some way, and then I can make my comment to that or relate that to some literature or some, as I talked about, explanation of how misunderstandings can happen due to language, different worldviews. Just make it obvious where I to what support I have for my statements. Is it my thoughts, or is it and my thoughts to what informants said, and how I can relate that, for example, to history or to literature. Make that obvious instead of just saying something and I don't know who is saying that. I have read papers where I don't know who these statements or where this statement come from. So that is a kind of passive writing for me. I'm not sure if I understand your question right, but yeah.
Thanks. I see both Greg and Ranjan have their hands up. So maybe Greg first and then Ranjan after.
Thanks. And Jenny, I'll just answer and or touch upon or give you something to think about on a couple of your comments there. And even Margarita, with some words not being in some indigenous languages, what I found over the years is that the Western or the colonial language is very linear in its thinking. So if you have, like, say, someone that's disabled and someone that's able-bodied, there's so many things on this line, this linear line from like, and it goes from like really good to really bad, like, you know, and we put those judgments on those things. But when you look at for cultures that are basically focused on circles with no beginning and no end, it's just a continuum. Like someone might be disabled, but they might be like, you know, still in youth, or they might be elder, there's different grades, but there's still value in them within the community. When you do have those things, and even when Bobby talks about, like, you know, people that are using drugs, people that are street affected, vulnerable people, a lot of those terms, again, are a lot of those kind of the view and the gaze that we put onto those kind of subjects and those finger quote, those people, is a Western way of looking at things. But again, when you say, like, you know, with someone that's, you know, addicted to, say, opioids, that's on the street and maybe involved in the sex trade work, those are someone's sons and daughters. I put male and female indifferent to us LGBTQIA+. You know, those are people within our community. And when you have them in the community, in that circle, it's a different way of looking at things. And I'm sure I'm speaking to kind of the converted here. But again, when you look at the Western ways of things, and even when you're reviewing things, I have to switch my mindset a lot from that kind of the way I was taught as a registered nurse. Well, you know, this is the disease process, you know, and I always just say, this is the most common thing I say, you know, when you go see the doctor or the nurse, you say, you know, and they say, well, what's wrong with, or what's the matter with you? And you should say, like, this is what matters to me. And you switch the focus. So a lot of it is to switch that focus. And the nice thing about these words not being in some languages, that you have to basically teach the settler, the colonizer, me, what is important to you. And I forgot to even put the link there. Anyways, for a passive voice, again, nursing is a female-dominated profession. We're kind of, you know, theory of the oppressed with Paulo Freire, those types of things. We're used to crabs in the bucket, and we're used to all that kind of stuff. So we kind of take on that kind of passivity. And this goes with Indigenous folks around the world as well. And so it's that passive voice, and it's coming, you know, coming through that. And I always try to get people more active. And again, it's even just looking at when you're reviewing your own documentation, your own documents, if it's in Word. Some people do like grammar check or whatever, but you can do style within your grammar check, and you can actually turn on things that will just pick out all the passive voice in it. So I put a link there, Jenny, and for anyone, but it's just like, how do you, like, it will Word. I'm a PC guy, so I'm not an Apple person, but reviewing kind of programs, they will pull that stuff out of there. So just like, you know, ask Mushum to Google how to find that stuff, and it'll always help you kind of change the settings on your own reviewing things, and it will actually pick that up. Because someone, you know, will submit something to me and say, well, Greg, how do you even like know all that stuff? Well, I took a master's level grammar course, but I just have things turned on my reviewing thing when I'm reviewing documentations or, you know, submissions to me. And a lot of times it picks a lot of that stuff up. Sometimes it's not perfect, but I included a link there now that kind of, it really helps. And it's just changed your mindset. And all passive voice is not all bad. Like sometimes, you know, it's fine. But if it's like all there all the time, it just gets a little bit, you want to be more active. We want to know what you think. And, you know, the ball was hit by Jenny, or Jenny hit the ball. So anyways.
Thanks, Craig. Ranjan, you had your hand up, but I'm not sure if you want to add. And then I think I'll wrap stuff up after that and have a quick chat with Mika, Kathy, Denise, and Jenny just about next week before kind of closing things for the day. So go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Ranjan.
No, I'm a story-based writer. I write many stories about my life, who I am as a researcher, how my work reshaped me all the time as I'm becoming. So active voice is a part of decolonial writing process for me, because when I'm writing, I can claim this is my story. This is I'm the researcher. I'm the telling what I'm doing, how I'm doing. So it's also political in active sense writing, because when I'm writing, I'm talking, okay, this is the research, I'm the researcher, what I did this way, and I have a political stand for my participant or for me as a researcher. So it has indirect impact of who we are as a researcher, what is our research, and also what we will need to do. That's why I found active voice is situating itself, not like I'm neutral. My research has never been neutral. I'm biased for me and for my participant. Active voice is help to situate that situation.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we kind of close stuff for the day? If not, I want to say a big thank you to Ranjan, Margarita, and Greg, and to the reviewers, Bobby and Cass, who had to leave already, for joining us and sharing with us your experience today. I'll clap on my end. I know everybody's muted, but thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and joining us. I know, Margarita, it's probably Friday early evening for you. So thank you for sharing your time with us, and Ranjan as well, a little bit earlier in Calgary this morning. So thanks so much for joining, and I really appreciate your time. So we'll say goodbye to you guys, and we'll stay on, the rest of us, for a quick chat.